All right, you guys. I'm joined by a much better looking version of Kip Sorensen today. You're filling in for Kip, Sean. How's that feel? This is your
That's
third time,
great.
second or third time?
Second time.
Second time. All right. So you did one with Kip. Now you're with me. You guys knocked it out of the park the last time you did the Ask Me Anything, and I got a lot of good feedback from guys as well about having you on. So I figured we'll gradually replace Kip, and we'll see if he listens because we'll just keep bashing on him this whole time. And if he doesn't say anything, we know he's not listening to us.
That's good. We can get away with it when he's not directly with us and able to put
Yes.
us in a choke.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, he is a dangerous man. So we'll do that when we're out of reach, arm's reach with him for sure. So everything good for you on your end, man?
It is. Just got back from Hawaii and
Yeah.
I miss being with you guys in Minnesota, but Hawaii was great.
Well, you would have shot all the deer if you were out there. So I'm not sure that we were too upset that you weren't out there. But yeah, we did miss you, man. We were able to get a couple of big bucks on the ground. We shot probably between the eight of us. I want to say 3 or 4 does. I was fortunate enough to tag out, which felt good because I've been going out there for 4 years, and this is the first time I've been able to do that. So all is well, man. All is well.
How do you feel about your bow going both ways now?
It's I'm gonna get in trouble. You're gonna get me in trouble here. I actually feel good. I had to take off the lady killer name of my bow, so now I'm gonna have to come up with a new name for my bow because it's no longer just the lady killer.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that
Well,
was a
guys,
cool looking buck too. It
dude, he was
was
rad. Yeah, he was big. He weighed 290 pounds on the hoof. So I don't know what, maybe 235 once he was dressed, but just a huge, huge deer. Brennan Lilly shot a big mature buck, not quite as heavy as mine, but the rack was bigger. Man, what an incredible week with good friends, and we had a great time out there.
awesome.
We'll have
Yeah,
to
we
get
did
you
a
out there
little
next
hunting
year.
in Hawaii and
What'd you
Austin
hunt?
shot axis deer.
Oh yeah, axis deer. That's right. You sent me the pictures. Austin shot what, 2 or 3, if I remember right.
He shot three. Yeah, I ended up
3.
not hunting so he could get in on
Yeah,
his and yeah, his first buck is, shot a couple does, got like 60 pounds of meat. It was great.
that's awesome. Have you had any of it yet?
Not yet. Tonight we're gonna barbecue.
So good. Yeah,
Yeah.
when we were in Hawaii earlier in the year, I took some to the Big Island with me, and after our hunt that we did together, and then we had a bunch of axis deer out there, and then we also did a goat hunt on the Big Island, and we had that meat there for dinner for a couple of nights. The first night was rough because we didn't cook it right, so it was really tough. But the second day we put that goat in the crock pot and left it going all day while we went to the beach and did our thing and came back that night and had goat tacos. Unbelievable. So good.
Yeah, that stuff. The key is slow, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Slow. So it gets some of that tenderness. Otherwise it just gets tough and chewy and not very good. So, well, cool, man. Well, let's get into some questions, guys. If you're listening for this for the first time, we are fielding questions today. They're coming from our exclusive brotherhood, the Iron Council, and we're on a big push right now to really grow our membership, especially as we lead up and ramp up into the new year, because there's a lot of guys out there, yourself included, potentially, who want to make 2022 the best year that you've had. So we're talking about goal setting. We're talking about the right strategies and principles. But I think one of the most, well, there's two things that are really important in the Iron Council. Number one is you get the framework. And you got to have frameworks. Sean, I think you would attest to that. Like, having a framework for success is crucial. And you could probably be successful without it, but you can't replicate it unless you have a framework that you can tap into that's proven to work. So that's number one. Number two is a network. You got to have a network, because if you're going at it alone, again, maybe some degree of success, but I guarantee that if you have a powerful network in your corner, that your success is going to only improve exponentially. So we offer the framework and the network inside the Iron Council. You can do that at orderofman.com/Iron Council. But let's get to the questions, man.
All right. First one is from Jerry Frawley. It says, if one was interested in getting into hunting, but has never been, or have the friendships currently to help facilitate that experience, what do you recommend they do to start down that path?
So wants to get into hunting, but doesn't have the experience and doesn't have the friendships that are already hunting. Am I understanding that
Yes.
correctly? Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, I would probably go on a very easy, like high success, like pig hunt in Texas. I think that's what I would do. I've thought about this a lot. Like the best thing you can do is get the experience in the field and potentially go with a guide or an outfitter that is proven to create a bunch of success and just talk with that individual. They're probably not very expensive. I haven't looked quite honestly, but you can go on a very high success rate pig hunt, probably spend, I don't know, maybe $1,000, maybe $1,500, talk with your guide. He'll tell you what you need and just go and get in the field. There's other things that you can do. You can learn from, if you're into archery, for example, you can learn from John Dudley. You can check out YouTube. There's so many different ways to do it and so many different hunting shows. My oldest son is all the time, Dad, can I go watch a hunting video? He's watching Pigman right now, is this guy right now. But yeah, I think that's the best way to do it. If you don't have a friend who's already hunting, that's the best way. But if you don't have that, then go on a high success pig hunt in Texas, spend a couple of grand with your ticket, food, and cost of the hunt. And I think you'll be immersed into it pretty quickly. I don't know. What suggestions do you have?
Yeah, I would add to that. I actually like starting with a high fence place because you don't have to get your licenses or any of that stuff. You just show up, you pay per animal, especially if you've never been, and see if it's something even for you to begin with. I know for me, my wife, it was interesting because I've only been hunting now for about 5 years. And when I got into it, my wife was like, "How are you going to hunt? You won't even kill spiders in our house." So I was like, "Okay, well, I want to do it. I wanted to know where my food came from and be more connected with that and get out of factory farming and that sort of thing." It's funny, I actually watched all those vegan videos on Netflix, kind of binge watched like Food Inc. and Sugar and, all these
Right.
things that are trying to make you vegan. And it made me just want to source my meat. And so I got into that and wasn't sure how I'd feel about shooting an animal, quite frankly. I did it a couple times when I was a kid with a rifle and didn't like it. And so went out with the bow, got decent with the bow and went out there, but went to a high fence place. So I didn't have to go through the licensing process or any of that. Showed up, shot a pig. The guy there that ran the high fence place helped me quarter it out, helped me gut it. It showed me the process. We went through all of it. He taught me a lot and I loved it. And especially loved once we had the meat and all of that. And I was hooked. And then I got super involved in the whole process. And so for me, it was archery. So I think you have to figure that out too. Maybe you start with a rifle. Maybe you start with straight out with archery. Everybody's different. I know personally, I don't like rifle hunting, so I only bow hunt. But like we just mentioned, Austin, I take him out with a rifle. I've taken my middle son Brody out with the rifle as well, as young as 10 in California. I'm in California for now. In California,
I like that.
yeah, we list our house November 1st, actually.
Oh,
So,
really?
yeah.
Nice.
And,
Good.
but in California, you have to be 12 to legally hunt and get your license. But at a high fence place, that requirement isn't necessary. And so during COVID, actually, I took the boys out when they were 10 and 11, and they both shot pigs before they could get their license to see how they would like it. And they turned out both loving it. So I like the high fence place. I know that that's kind of, for whatever reason, controversial, with people going,
Well,
but I
I
think it's the
mean,
perfect place to learn.
I agree. And I don't have any problem with a high fence. If I was going to choose, I would choose to hunt public or private land without it being fenced necessarily, because I think there's a challenge that comes with that. But
For
it's
sure.
all hunting, and I think that's a great way. But I will say, be careful on the licensing stuff, because that may have been your experience, but I know that there's areas where, even on a high fence, you still would be required to have a license with the state. So just make sure you know your regulations, like figure that stuff out. If you're going to get into whether it's rifle hunting or archery, I do both. I like both, and for different reasons. I mean, here's the cool thing. You can go into any bow shop, and every town has a bow shop. Even this little rural area that I live, they've got a bow shop 10 minutes from here. The guy's been a friend for the past almost 2.5 years or so now. They're going to get you set up. Like if you just go in there and you say, "Hey, look, I don't know anything about this. I've got $1,500 to spend on a bow. It may not even be that much. Maybe it's $1,000. They're going to get you dialed in, set up with a bow. They're going to get you your arrows. They're going to get you a sight. Most shops have an archery range built into them, so they can help you get that practice dialed in and start getting tight shop groups. So like the resources are there. There's an organization I'm working with right now, and I'm actually going to go on a hunt. It's a pig hunt that the guys put together, and they teach you everything from what to look for, how to shoot. They have a range, and then you go out and you shoot a pig, and they show you how to break it down. They show you different meal prep stuff. So like in a week, they take you through this entire process. So I'm doing that early next year with my oldest son, because I actually want to make that resource available for you guys, because I know there's so many of you who want to hunt. So yeah, I think that those are all great suggestions, good ways to get into it.
Yeah. If just one more thing I'd like to say too, is that the community in hunting is something like I've never seen in anything else. Honestly.
Completely.
I mean, it's like, especially growing up surfing, that's kind of like a selfish thing to do. Guys don't want to share their spots, and they don't want to share, some
cutting in
things
front of each other, breaking into waves and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
But in hunting, it's the opposite. And whether it's your local bowl shop or your local gun shop, you just start asking about hunting and resources, and holy smokes, man. I mean, it's like everyone knows someone. Like when we were in Hawaii, I didn't have to look up anything. My friend Shane was like, "Hey, I have a buddy on Maui. Go to call him up and see what happens." I end up, this guy would have taken me every day if I wanted to, to different spots, and the resources are there. So many guys love sharing the experience and helping people get into it. So I think you'll find that once you just start, like you said.
Well, and not to mention, it's just better having people with you when you're hunting, because again, we were in Hawaii with 7 or so of us, and the stories are better. The memories are better. There's more experiences. We get to make fun of each other, and there's all sorts of things we can make fun of each other about, which I won't get into this podcast necessarily. But then Minnesota was the same way, 7, 8 of us. Some of the guys were in Hawaii. We had some new guys there with us. And after the hunt, after the morning sit, before the evening sit or after the morning sit, we were there hanging out, spending time together, having good conversations. So like you said, the community is powerful. I mean, there's so much value outside of the hunting world, or the hunting aspect of it, that makes it immensely valuable for me.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool. All right. Next question.
Next question's from Joshua Crosley. He says, how do you find ways to connect with a child that does not share your interest? For example, you clearly have a ton of common interests with your oldest son, but what about your other children that are very different than you?
Yeah, I mean, my other 3, so I've got 4. I've got 3 boys and a girl from the ages of 13 to 5. My 13-year-old, yeah, clearly, I mean, we do a lot together. He's starting a podcast. He loves hunting. He's very big into sports. He's lifting. He was into jujitsu. He told me the other day, he's like, "Dad, I can't train jujitsu with you." I'm like, "What? Why?" He's like, "Because I can't lose any weight. He's preparing for his first powerlifting meet in the next week or 2. So that was disappointing, but hey, he's into it. My other kids aren't necessarily into the same things I am, but that doesn't mean I can't be into their things. Right. So my second son is very big into arts. Like, he loves to draw and paint and do all kinds of different art things. He's big into technology. So he likes coding on the computer. He likes building websites, that sort of thing. And then he's very analytical when it comes to like building and breaking things down and seeing the way that they work. So he loves Legos. Well, I love Legos too, but the other 2 I'm not totally into, but that doesn't mean that we can't share that common interest, because it really isn't about me. It's about them. And so if they're important to me, then that means the things they're into are important to me. My wife is another great example. She's into a more homesteading type activities, I would say. So beekeeping, gardening, food canning, and preservation. Like, I'm not into those things, but I love walking in the garden with my wife because she's so excited. I see that big smile on her face, and she's explaining all the different variations of tomatoes that she planted and the different kind of beans and why this grows there and that grows there, and why she puts sunflowers here so it shades the tomato plant, like all this stuff that I don't really totally care about, except for when it comes time to eat. But because she's interested in it, I'm interested in it, and it isn't manufactured, and I'm not pretending and I'm not patronizing her. Like I love seeing her happy. I love seeing my children in their element. So we foster that, whatever it is. If it's cars, if it's Legos, if it's the computer, if it's just being outside and playing catch, if it's, wrestling, my youngest, my 5-year-old, he loves to wrestle. So we bought mats and we put mats in the front room, and every day we spend, maybe it's 10 minutes a day, maybe it's an hour another day, because that's what time allows. But I'm into whatever they're into. They don't need to be into what I'm into. I used to be that guy where it's like, man, I really wish all my kids were into the same things. And to a degree, I still feel that way. But now, hey, look, if you're into whatever, I'm into it too. Let's make it happen. Let's figure it out. And plus, it's a great opportunity for me to get exposed to new things that I wouldn't probably do on my own or be interested in, or even introduced to any other way. So I think there's just a level of curiosity that I have with my kids. I'm curious in them, and I'm also curious in these activities. And it's really been a great way to connect with all of my kids, not just my oldest, who happens to be basically my clone without a beard.
Yeah. Which is very true.
Yeah.
I would add to that, also create experiences or create time to connect, where my oldest is my daughter, who's 16. And we don't do a lot of things. Actually, she was just talking about hunting not too long ago, and hey, I'd like to go hunting with you. I was like, that's awesome. But no, that part of the hunting is not just shooting the animal. We're going to have to break it down. You're going to have to gut it. You're going to have to skin it. And she's like, well, I don't want to do that. Like, well, if you want to go hunting, you're going to have to do that. Right. And so it's just one of those things that she has to understand, if she wants to do those things. But we don't have to do that to connect. I can do daddy-daughter dates. We can go out and we can just hang out when we're driving around. She just got her driver's license, and I make sure we're talking, that we're having conversations. I'm asking her about her friends. Before we were doing that driving around, I would do it on Sundays. I'd do once a month these daddy interviews, where I would ask them about their friends. Who are your best friends? What do you guys like to do? What are you into right now? So asking those questions and just making sure that I'm finding the time to connect with them, whether we have stuff in common or not. You can still have that connection. Like you said, Brody, my 11-year-old, he's a total, him and Austin are opposites. Austin's like the athlete and Brody's like the nerd. He loves coding and he loves all that stuff. But he's also a football player. He also does jujitsu, because I just told him to try it and he ended up liking it. But he's also tried soccer and baseball. He didn't like those sports. He didn't like those things, but he at least tried. All my kids surf, but none of them love it like I do. So we don't have that connection with any of them. And will they do it sometimes? Yeah. But we do it as a thing, as a place to connect, not as something that we both love doing.
Yeah.
And so it's when they talk, like Brody, for instance, if he talks about coding or those, he gets super into it. And most of what he's talking about, I have no idea what he's talking about, but I'll still listen. I'll still ask questions, and be involved.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's good. There's, as you were saying that about creating these experiences, because I think that is really important. What a lot of guys will do is they'll get busy and consumed with all their day-to-day activities and work and all this other stuff they have going on. And then if and when they have any time left, then they'll go ahead and spend whatever's remaining with their kids. And it's usually very minimal, right? So they come home from work, maybe have dinner together, which I think is a non-negotiable, guys. Like, make that happen. Have dinner with your family, sitting down, not watching TV, like sitting at the dining room table and eating together, where you can ask those questions that you just posed a second ago, Sean. So you have dinner together, and then it's like they have sports or they want to go out with their friends. And so there's no real time. So you have to create that. And there's a great resource called the Family Board Meeting. Have you ever heard that, Sean? Family Board Meeting?
I haven't heard that, but sounds like it's going to be similar to what we do every week.
Probably. He actually talks about it from an annual perspective of creating this one big event or scenario that you can do with your kids, but you let them be hyper involved in the process. So this is a book, Family Board Meeting, by Jim Shields, I believe is his last name. And he talks about how to structure these meetings, these board, he calls them board meetings because I think they're into surfing as well. That's why they're called board meetings.
Oh, got it.
Yeah. But how to structure these things, how to set them up, how to get your kids involved. One year I took my second son, who is really, really into cars. I just said that I'm not into cars. I don't really care. You know, I see these guys with their luxury cars and their high performance cars, and they're cool. Nothing wrong with it. But like, that isn't my thing. I'm not too excited about that. But he is, man. And he can tell me every kind of car and what the engine is and all the components of it and how fast it goes and how much it costs and all that kind of stuff. So one year, when we were in Utah, we were about an hour and a half, 2 hours north of Vegas. We decided, hey, we're going to go to the racetrack. It was his birthday. And so we went down to the racetrack, and I was going to get, you know, the lessons or whatever on the racetrack with some of these high performance cars. Well, he ended up being too small. He didn't weigh enough. So that racetrack we went to wouldn't let him ride because he wasn't heavy enough. So we went to another racetrack on the other end of Vegas. They said the same thing. And I'm like, well, screw this. And we went to the exotic car rental place, and we rented, I don't even know what we rented, some Acura ZXT or something, who knows? Like he could tell me. Again, he knows. And we raced that thing around Vegas for like 4 or 5 hours, and it was awesome. You know, I had fun. He had fun. It opened his eyes to possibilities. He talked about how he wants to own a car like this. And we use that as fuel to be able to talk about adding value into people's lives in exchange for money and being able to find a lucrative career, but following things that are important to you. And man, it just turned into this powerful conversation, all because we spent 24 hours, and maybe between getting down there and gas, food, hotel, and the rental, I mean, maybe $1,000, but that $1,000 was well worth the time and the energy and the interest that I expressed to him, and gave him some possibility. He still talks about that. And that was probably 3 years ago, 3 years ago. So maybe even long, might've been more like 4 years ago. So he keeps talking about it. It's powerful stuff, man.
Yeah. The time is more important than anything, I think.
Yeah.
In all of that.
I'm trying to pull up the author of this book. Jim, let's see. Yeah. Jim Shields. Yep. That's right.
Yeah.
So,
they I don't know if you've heard of the Heirs. They're husband and wife. They've written a bunch of different books, family books, especially. We've used some things from them. They talk about family economy, and we've done that. And it's you mentioned board meeting. We kind of do an annual thing where we look at everybody's, you know, kind of what they want for the year, goals they have. We do it before summertime. We do it before breaks, things like that. What sports they want to be involved in. And then that breaks down to our family nights weekly. Every week on Sunday nights, or daytime, we look at what everybody has for the week and what they're doing, so that we're all on the same page. And we all know, hey, you know, so-and-so is going to be a little heavier on their time spent this week because they have football, or they have playoffs, or they have this going on. You know, so-and-so has finals and they're going to need a little extra help. And so we're going to be doing that. You know, hey, mom and dad have this coming up, so we're going to be a little less present this week, or whatever. But at least we're all on the same page, and we know that, and we can carve out, make the time. Like you said, if we're looking at a bird's eye view of our calendar each week, we can find the time to make sure that's being spent together.
Yeah, 100%. And what you're talking about is this level of intentionality that most people just don't have in their lives. And then they wonder why they're not connected with their kids, or they're not intimate with their wife, or they're not getting the promotion they say they want, or they're not losing weight, or any number of things. It's like, okay, but you're not being intentional about it. And sometimes, and this is my personality, I don't know if this is yours, Sean, but if you gave me like 4 hours to complete a task, my knee-jerk reaction is to just go from 0 to 100 miles an hour immediately. And I actually have to temper myself and say, hold on. Like it's that adage, if you give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'll spend the first 2 or whatever it is sharpening my axe. I have to personally do that, and I do it every morning. I do it with our battle planner. Like every morning, it's very tempting for me to say, oh, I'm not going to fill that out. Like I'm too busy. I'm just going to go. And every time I do that, I'm less effective. I'm more stressed. And then when I sit down for 10, 20 minutes and I map out my day, I figure out exactly what I'm going to do, why I'm going to do it. Even this morning, you know, I sent you a message. I'm like, hey man, I can't meet at 11, but let's do 11:15. Well, I did that because I sat down and I actually looked at my calendar. I'm like, no, that's too tight. And so I made those adjustments. But what if I didn't do that? Well, then I'd be stressed out. You would have joined me on a call earlier. So you would have actually bumped into and butted into the podcast that I had prior to this. It would have created problems. But because I took that 10 to 15 minutes and I was very deliberate and intentional about my day, it creates all sorts of better opportunities and more effective ways of doing things throughout the day. Just more efficient.
Money. That's
yes,
money.
sir. All right, man. What's next?
Next question, Jason Smith. What does the father-daughter event look like so far as challenges, activities, speakers? Excited for my daughter and I to participate.
I'm excited too. I don't know though. Like if I'm being really honest, I don't know. So you guys know this if you've been around for any amount of time. Like I don't talk a whole lot about my daughter on the podcast or even on social media by design. Like we know as fathers, we're just more protective of our daughters than we are of our sons. I would say that's pretty universally true. Anybody who says that's not the case I just think they're lying about it or something. Like we're way more protective with our daughters. 100. Wouldn't you agree? Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. But there's been enough of a demand. So if you guys don't know what he's talking about, there's enough of a demand. And I think it's time that instead of just focusing on fathers' relationships with their sons, that we also consider how that relationship dynamic would work and how we can improve our relationships with our daughters. So we are going to be doing a father-daughter event in 2022. Everything that we do now is done here in the barn. So when we do our legacy event, Sean, because you guys were out here, you guys stay in the barn, we're all together. Like that wouldn't be appropriate for a father-daughter event. So that's going to have to change. Like they aren't going to stay here at the property. Their lodging or wherever is going to be built into the package. But I don't anticipate it being all that different as far as activities. I mean, why would a young lady not be interested in doing physical fitness with her dad? Why would she not be interested in learning some jujitsu? In fact, I would say learning self-defense could be potentially maybe even more important for a daughter to learn. Archery, hatchet throwing, the conversations, planning, like everything that we do, I'm not sure it's going to be all that different. Just some of the logistics might tweak and change a little bit just for the appropriateness of the event.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I can give. I don't know. Again, I'm one of these guys. Look, I just said it. I'm one of these guys. It's like father-daughter event. Yeah, definitely. Let's do it. And then I pull the trigger and I'm like, wait, where was I aiming? I don't remember what we're trying to do. And so it's been good in a lot of ways because I get a lot of shit done. But it's also been a challenge in that sometimes I leave a wake of collateral damage because I don't think about like how those decisions and my actions impact fully everything else that I might have going on. And then things aren't as efficient. And so I end up having to go in and backfill and say, well, that was stupid. And that was a mistake. And that was inefficient. And we lost money here and we did this here. And that was good. And that was bad. And so I have to like backfill all of that. So I don't know what's better. There's probably a spectrum and it's probably different depending on the situation, but I've always been a very intuitive, action-oriented person. So I need to temper that at times because I know that about myself.
Sounds right, though. I think your thought process is on the right path as far as what to do.
Yeah, it is. I think, again, intuitively, people say, well, how do you know? Like, right, how do you know this is going to work? And it's like, I don't actually know. I just did a podcast last week. And I said, what did I title it? Like developing the let's find out mentality, because a lot of people, what they do is these guys are walking around and they're like, well, what if this happens? And what if this goes bad? And what about this scenario? And they play this what if game. And it's like, you could do that and you could find out all the little flaws and faults and vulnerabilities in your plan or your thought process, or you can just say, let's find out, like, let's just put it all on red and let it ride and like, see what happens. Because what's the worst that can happen? That can happen if you do that. I mean, I'm not performing brain surgery, right? Like I'm not putting my entire family's life savings at risk. I'm not putting my family or friends' mental or physical well-being in any danger. So like, what's the worst that can happen? I lose a few bucks, don't sleep maybe as much as I could, end up failing, and then figuring it out along the way. So again, that's easy for me to say because that's my personality. I know that isn't as easy for some guys who are more analytical by nature, maybe a little bit more afraid of risk. That's something that, I have to consider as well.
Yeah. And I can say this from being at the Legacy, that was world class. But you told us the story. The first one wasn't. As a matter of fact, it didn't even happen.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah. I lost money on it, because nobody showed up, and I didn't lose my security deposit, but I ended up bumping it back several months, and it was more expensive because it was in the season that I did it, where we're at the lodge we were staying at. And so, I look at that, and that's a failure. The 100%, that's a failure. Guys don't like saying, well, you didn't fail, you learned. No, I did both. I failed and I learned from it. And I'm okay with that. Like, that's what my friend Pete Roberts would call a tuition payment. And look, I don't want to pay more tuition than I have to, but all of us have to pay. There's a price to be paid. And sometimes that's money. Sometimes that's sleep. Sometimes that's, your mental or emotional well-being, but it has to be paid. So I'm willing to pay it.
Yeah. And the more you pay, the more you'll get back.
Yeah. It's an investment, right? As opposed to just a payment or a tuition. It's actually an investment in your future and in a possibility. Yeah.
All right. Next question. Joseph Hayton. I have 5 children, 4 girls and 1 boy. My boy needs to learn how to be a little tougher, mostly mentally. I take him hunting and he enjoys sports, but anytime things get hard, he wants to quit. I've always made him finish out the season, but he ends up hating me for a few weeks. I'm afraid that if he doesn't find some fortitude, he'll be a quitter in high school and beyond. What activities would you suggest that could cultivate more mental toughness and fortitude?
I actually saw this question, and it is a challenge because my kids are pretty tough. And I wonder if that's nature or nurture. It's probably a bit of both. And I mean, I'd like to say that it's because of what we've done, but at the same time, like, a lot of it is just their personalities, so, but there is one flaw that I think that we have in society. There's a lot of flaws, actually, but one, as it relates to this, is that a lot of the times, even we as fathers, we celebrate the end result more than we do the process. Right. So for example, my second son had a football game yesterday, and it really didn't go well. Like, he played okay. The team didn't play well at all. The team they played against, they were big, strong, athletic kids. They were a significantly better team, but our team just didn't play to the standard they could. And it was very tempting for me to say, well, you really need to improve this and that, and you lost, and we want to win. And sure, yes, the goal is to win, of course. But I thought about it as I was contemplating what I was going to talk about with my son on the ride home. And instead of that, I led off with, hey, I'm really proud of you. And he kind of looked at me. He's like, but we lost, Dad. I said, yeah, you did lose. Sure. But I'm still proud of you because you played hard. You didn't let your head down. The guy that he was blocking, 99, was a huge child, like massive, like a man. And he had to, and my second son is not that big for his age. And he blocked him, and he did his best, and he got flat backed a bunch of times, but he got up every time. He didn't pull himself out of the game. He was a little banged up. And I said, that's what I'm proud of, is I'm proud of not the scoreboard. Sure, we want to win, and we'll figure out ways to make that happen, but I'm proud that you got up. I'm proud that you were there. I want you to consider how many kids aren't even playing football that maybe they should be, or they have a desire to, but they're afraid. Or how many kids ask themselves to get pulled out of the game because it was hard, even though they didn't really need to be pulled out of the game. And we talked about the behavior more than we talked about the end result. And I told him, I said, look, the results are going to take care of themselves. You're going to get better. You're going to improve. You're going to learn new skills that are going to help you win. But the attitude that you have is going to help you succeed in life, well beyond what's going to happen in a football game that you're not going to remember in 2 weeks, let alone 20 years. So I think the point I'm making here is that we just need to do a better job celebrating the behaviors, the actions, the process, especially in little kids, more than the result itself. There's a line though, because you might, if you go too far, it might become like, well, at least you're here and you had fun. Well, no, that's not really the objective either. So you do have to be careful of getting into that participation trophy mentality. There's both, and it's on a spectrum, just like anything else. So you got to find that proper balance and where to apply it based on the conversations that need to be had in any given time.
I think you nailed it right there with the end. It's the conversations and what we talked about earlier, and making the time and having the conversation. It's not just the season or putting them in athletics or jujitsu or whatever it is that's going to make them stronger. What's going to make them stronger is you pointing out what they're doing right, you congratulating them on what you saw in their effort or whatever it is. And I think especially as men, we tend to focus on, because we get it a lot growing up. We get it from coaches, we get it from teachers, we get it from our parents a lot of the time, where they only point out the things we're not good at, or that we did wrong, or that we made mistakes in, but they're not great at pointing out our strengths and what we're doing right. And so I think it's important that you accentuate those things in your children. No matter what it is, you tell them what they're doing right, regardless of, like you said, the outcome. And then it's those conversations though that are powerful. It's not necessarily even the action. It's you making sure that they understand what you liked about what they did. And that hopefully is the stuff that sticks. You can only teach principles. You can point out what they did right. If we're talking football, both of my boys had totally opposite seasons where, Brody's team did outstanding. He scored, I think, like 10 or 12 touchdowns this year as a running back, which is unexpected for that guy. But he just crushed it. And then Austin's team, they didn't win a single game. They only scored once all season. I think they just got crushed, but their thing was an attitude thing. So it was a great experience for us though, for me and Austin, because Austin wants to win at everything. He's super competitive. He wants to excel. And he did his best. And I pointed that out every game. Like, man, you gave it, except for one game. And this was 2 weeks ago. And I told him, this is the first time all season I've been disappointed because you let your attitude get a hold of you. You got down on yourself. You let another kid get in your head. You started arguing with your own team. And, it's the only time all season I've been disappointed. It's when you give your best and you don't use the referee as an excuse, and you don't use other players not blocking for you, whatever it is, as your excuse, and you give it your all anyways. I'm going to be proud of you no matter what. I'm going to love you regardless if you win or lose, if you do your best or not. But I'll tell you what, I'm going to be proud of you if you do your best. And I don't know if that's going to stick. Right. All I can do is church leader of mine was famous for saying, you teach correct principles and let them govern themselves. That's all I'm hoping for my kids, but I have to make sure I'm having those conversations and teaching those principles.
Well, there's another thing that you're hitting on that you skimmed over that I think guys really need to hear is you're also telling the truth.
Yes.
Like it's so important.
Yeah, it's got to be true. I'm glad you pointed that out. It has to be true.
Because a lot of parents,
they can smell it, right? They know. BSing
they
them.
know. Yeah, because what a lot of parents will do is they'll say, well, you played really hard and you played your hardest. Well, the kid didn't play his hardest, and as a parent he didn't, but you say it, now you're a liar. So you actually undermined your own credibility. But also you need to be able to have a hard conversation, which is, and I've had that same conversation. One of my oldest son asked me after one of his games, like, what did you think about the way I played? And I said, I don't think you played as hard as you could. Like, I have to be willing to tell the truth. The same thing. And guys always laugh at me when I say this, but I will stand by this. This is a hill that I will die on. When my wife asked me about a particular pair of pants or a dress, like, I'm going to tell her straight up, hey, that one's not as flattering, or, that one I don't like as much as this other dress that you have. Like, I know that sounds like a very small, trivial thing, but it's not. Like, I'm telling the truth. And so when she comes to me and says, how does this look? And I say, you look beautiful. She knows that's true because I would say otherwise.
Yeah.
And so we have to be willing to tell the truth in all things. There's a couple of other points that I made here as you were talking that I think will help with the mindset thing and the mental toughness. Family mantras are big for us, little quips that we use and say and tease each other about. So we have two that came to mind immediately. Is number one, Micklers do hard things. It's not even we do hard things or like we're going to try. It's Micklers do hard things. That's if you're a Mickler, that's an expectation that we do hard things. The other one is Micklers try new things, whether that's at the dinner table and you have to try a new vegetable, or a food that doesn't look particularly appetizing. Like Micklers try new things and Micklers do hard things. They all laugh and roll their eyes when I say it. We tease each other about it, but I also catch them saying it to each other. My children saying it to each other and calling each other out when one of them is not doing what they should be doing. Hey, Micklers do hard things. You know that. And then they get after it. They're holding each other accountable. So family mantras. And then also there might be, this goes into the last question or one of the last questions about not being interested in the same thing that your kids are. They're not going to be as excited about things that don't interest them. So we have to ask ourselves, are we getting them involved in activities for them or for us?
Yeah.
And if it's for us, then maybe it's not a mental toughness issue. Maybe it's a lack of interest. And if there's another activity or sport or interest or hobby that they actually enjoy and they're like very interested in it, I don't think you're going to have to teach mental toughness. So I think there's also some space here to evaluate whether the activity is in their wheelhouse or not. And still doing things that aren't comfortable is good, but also let's try to explore the veins of interest that they have. I think that's important too.
Yeah, that was money. That was gold. As you said that, I thought of coaching. You know, in coaching kids and coaching youth, you see so many coaches, especially dads, that just want to win at all costs, right? And they're just, but it's because they want to win. And
right.
they're like, most of the time the kids don't care, especially when they're younger, right? You have like
they want their kids
8-year-olds
to make
running
them look
around.
good. That's what
Yeah.
they want.
Yeah. I've seen literally coaches with their own sons in a critical situation in a game, and they tell their kid to walk intentionally or whatever, not swing the bat. And let's try and get you on that way because, little Johnny's coming up after you and we want him to try and win the game. Well, how deflated did you just make your kid instead of giving him the opportunity to do something great? And then if he strikes out, there's a learning lesson there too. But instead of that, you want to win so bad. You want to win so bad that you're not willing to give him that opportunity, right? I mean, it's pretty sad actually when you see it happen. It happens all the time.
Sad. And I've done that. I've personally done that. So I had a situation years and years ago where we had playing baseball. We were, I can't really remember the exact scenario. We were either up by a run or two or down by a run or two. And we needed our pitcher to just close out the inning. I think we were up and we needed the pitcher to close out the inning and he was struggling and I yelled at him and I saw him I broke him a little bit. And I saw him got teary-eyed and I'm like, oh shit. Like, what are you doing, man? Like, is the game this important that you're going to break down a young man who actually is very, very talented and potentially turn him off from something that will serve him for the rest of his life because you're being an asshole? And I remember that. And it still stings to this day that I did that. And I talked with him and I talked with his dad and he kept playing for me for a couple of years after. And he's a very talented, hardworking, athletic kid. Man, that could have gone very badly. I'm so glad that I caught myself and checked myself on that. But we do it, man. And it sucks because we're really doing some damage to the young men and young women we say we're trying to serve, all because we let our own ego and arrogance get in the way.
Yeah. That is key that you caught it though and said something and corrected it.
Yeah, of course.
That's
and you
huge.
have to. And that's letting the ego go, right? Because I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to talk to him and his dad about the things that I did wrong as his coach.
Yeah.
That's an ego thing. That isn't a productive outcome thing. That's me worrying more about my ego than it is to have productive outcomes.
Awesome. There's one that says, Sean, when will we get our BJJ rematch from the legacy event? That's from Jake Thompson.
Anytime.
Name
the place and the time. I will be there.
Name the parking lot.
That's right.
Yeah, no, it absolutely. Next time we're together, I'd love to. Let's see. Wayne McPherson. It seems as though society is trying to redefine what it means to be a man on a weekly, if not daily basis. At what point do we acknowledge it can't all be a coincidence, and what can one do about it? not sure the lone wolf mentality will benefit many in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's 100% right. I think we've been there for a very long time, from things as seemingly innocuous as the buffoon father on every sitcom that you see, to the family court system. We're having somebody on the podcast to talk about the family court system and how that's stacked against men. You look at suicide, depression, drug abuse, high school dropout rates, runaway rate. I mean, it's horrible. It's horrible. I mean, things are really stacked against men right now. There's some great books out there, one by Dr. Leonard Sachs, Boys Adrift and Why Gender Matters, and then one by Dr. Warren Farrell called The Boy Crisis. And they talk about this. Now, we do have to be a little bit careful of this, because I don't ever want it to come across as complaining or victimhood mentality. And every time I point out something that I see societally wrong, there is inevitably somebody who's like, well, you're just playing a victim. No, guys, listen very carefully. To acknowledge the problem is not to play the victim, but to sit in it and wallow in it and never do anything about it and use it as an excuse to self-destruct. Okay, that's victim mentality.
Yeah.
But to acknowledge a problem and then begin to formulate solutions and plans and strategies and ways to improve and ways to overcome, that's not a victimhood mentality. Could you imagine being a warrior and leading an army into battle, but saying, hey, I don't want to be a victim, so we're not really going to study the enemy? What? Right? Or going into, since we're talking about sports, going into a football game and saying, hey, we don't really want to play the victim card here, so we're not going to study tape. We're just going to show up and just, wing it and see how it goes. That's ridiculous. And yet there's a lot of people who believe that just because you point out some flaws and challenges and issues with society, that somehow it's the victimhood mentality. It isn't. Guys, if you want to know what you're up against, you have to know what your enemy is doing. And that's not hyperbole, by the way. I wholeheartedly believe that the government primarily would love nothing more than to see men be weak and cowardly and pathetic and not at the head of their household, not leading their families and their businesses and their communities well, not building levels of wealth that make them free, let them pursue those things, not be educating their children and let the war do it through public school systems. That's the enemy. That's the enemy to me, and that's the enemy to my family. So the first step to answer Wayne's question is acknowledgement. It's kind of like recovery or overcoming addiction. The first step is acknowledging that there's a problem. If you're not willing to admit that, nothing else matters, because you're not going to do anything about it, because you don't recognize anything as being a problem. So number one,
I think that's what Order of Man is. You've acknowledged that, and that's why you started this movement to reclaim and restore masculinity.
And that's why we use that verbiage, by the way, reclaim and restore, not redefine. Yeah. Masculinity doesn't need to be redefined. It needs to be restored. It needs to be reclaimed. We need to step into it. We need to embrace it. And I have a bunch of people who love to say things like, well, the reason men are so depressed is because we've been conditioned to hold in our emotions. No, the reason men are so depressed is because everybody, since the time they were young men, little boys, have been telling them to act like little girls. And that's why you're depressed, because you see yourself as a man as this, and yet you're told and reinforced to behave like this. And there's this huge discrepancy between the way that you feel and the way that you're supposed to behave. You're supposed to be men. You're supposed to be strong. You're supposed to be capable. You're supposed to be developing skills. You're supposed to be leading yourself and other people well. You're supposed to be fit. You're supposed to be adding value and in turn building levels of wealth. That's what you're supposed to be doing. And anybody who is doing that, I call it bridging that integrity gap. Any man who is doing that is going to feel better about himself, barring mental illness and some of those things that are certainly a factor. But somebody who does not have mental illness or chronic depression and these types of things can solve a lot of their own problems about feelings of inadequacy and underperformance by performing, by improving, and by getting better. So the first step, acknowledgement. Number two, fix yourself. You got to fix yourself. You got to build wealth. You got to lose weight. You've got to add value. You've got to develop skill set. You've got to have hobbies and activities and interests. You've got to build a band of brothers. These are the things that we're talking about. You've got to have the framework and the network like we addressed earlier. And then once you have that, the first thing that you do is you lead your family. So you teach your sons and daughters how to do it. We talked a little bit about that here in this podcast. You lead your wife. You walk hand in hand with her. You help her where she's weak. She helps you where you are, and you get better. So you lead your family. Number two, you start now expanding that locus of control, right? So now you go into your community and you serve. You serve on school boards. You go volunteer at the school to help out with young men and young women who need help with tutoring or mentorship or whatever. You coach youth sports teams and you get involved because you might be the only permanent male fixture in those young men's lives. And then from there, you just keep expanding, but only as your capacity to do so. Like you can't go out and say, well, you know, like I really want to change everything, so I'm going to go run for president. It's like, well, hold up. What about all this other stuff? And could you imagine if tens or hundreds of millions of men across the planet said, I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to learn how to add value. I'm going to make a lot more money than I currently am. I'm going to pursue things that are meaningful to me. I'm going to build up friendships. I'm going to lead my family, and I'm going to serve in my community. Like imagine 10 million men doing that. And then the other thing I would say, the last point that I would make on this is that you have a responsibility to help other men do those things. So if you have all of that dialed in, then you have responsibility to pass it on. And passing it on might be as simple as getting out your phone right now, taking a screenshot and sending this podcast to your brother or your dad or a friend or a coworker who needs to hear it, or posting it up on social media. Or maybe you're in the Iron Council and you know somebody's struggling, Wayne. And so you're like, you know what? I want you to be in the Iron Council. Come join me, and paying for his membership if you have to. Right? Like if it means just sharing the work that we're doing here, then that's great. Do that. If it's starting your own men's club or men's organization or getting together every Friday, I get emails from guys who have men's meetups. A lot of them revolve around church, and they'll take a spiritual message from church. And then they'll also take whatever the Friday field notes was, and they'll use that as a point of discussion. That other guys use the book and they'll break it down into chapters and sections of the book, and they'll discuss one chapter per month. We've been doing this for 6.5 years now. Thousands and thousands of hours, hundreds of thousands of words at your disposal. Use them to help other guys do the same thing that you're doing right now.
Good answer.
I've thought about it. I've thought about it a little bit.
Yeah, you can tell. It's obvious.
Yeah. Cool, man. Let's take one or two more.
All right. Austin Yardley says, what are the first steps for building trust from the bottom up after you lose someone's trust in you?
I think we hit it. Tell the truth.
Yeah.
In all things. And so that might mean that the words you share are truthful. And some of that might need to be some acknowledgement of indiscretion. Like there might be, and I'm assuming maybe he's talking about a wife or spouse or girlfriend or something. I would assume. Would you assume that?
Yeah, I thought the same thing.
Yeah. And even if it isn't, the lessons are still the same. But let's just say it's a spouse. Okay, well, you're going to need to talk about some past performance issues. Like you have to tell the truth. You have to come clean. You have to wipe that slate clean. And only then can you build upon a foundation of trust. How do you build trust if it's built on a faulty foundation? Well, you can't. It might be the facade of trust, but one little thing can make that thing crumble, right?
Yeah.
So
I think it's Ben Franklin who said that you could spend a lifetime building a reputation and one poor deed to ruin it.
Definitely. It happens. So you need to make those deposits into the foundation that you're building by telling the truth. And that might mean that when your wife comes and says, hey, do you like this dress? That maybe you do have to say, there's a tactful way to do it, by the way, guys. But it might mean, I don't like that one. I like the black one better, or that one isn't as flattering. Or, that like it's the friend who has, a booger on his face. Like, why wouldn't you tell him he has a booger on his face? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like somebody who wouldn't say that is not somebody to be trusted. But if I came to you and said, Sean, you got something on your nose right there, like you would appreciate that, I would think, because you don't want to walk around with that thing hanging down from your nose all day with your clients and people you care about, right?
Well, especially
a
if
piece of toilet paper
you're
on your
the
shoe.
like 10th guy that I've talked to while I had the booger on my face, and you're finally the guy who told me.
Exactly. Exactly. So you have to tell the truth in all ways. Also, another element of telling the truth is doing things that you said you would do. Right. So, when I went to Minnesota, I told my wife I had some things I wanted to get done around the house, one of which was putting the blinds on the windows. Well, I didn't get to it. And there were some reasons I didn't get to it, but ultimately I failed in my purpose and my objective. And what did I do? Well, I undermined a little bit of trust. Now it's okay in this scenario because I've built up enough in the bank to be able to take out some withdrawals occasionally. But guess what I did? The first thing I did when I got back, she left, she went to visit family, and my son and we put those blinds up. So when she comes back, she's going to see those blinds are up and trust restored, right? Again, that might seem like a small thing, but if you do all of these small things in a positive direction, day in and day out and day in and day out, over time, you have so much capital and like trust capital that if you mess up here or there in small ways, it's fine. But also the inverse is true. If you say, hey, hon, I'll take the trash out and you don't, and I'll put the blinds up and you don't, and I'll pick up my son at this time and you don't, and hey, we're going to be okay financially, and you make stupid financial decisions, or I'm going to quit drinking and you don't, and you do that every day, all day for a year or 2 years or 10 years, it's just as bad. So you have to build up that trust bank account is the way I like to look at it. And you do that by telling the truth forever.
The only thing I would add to that is that you also have to not get upset when they bring up those things where you failed. It at first, because it's going to be hard. It's to gain that trust back, and they're going to bring it up. And so you have to not get upset when they do and just prove yourself.
Well, and sometimes aren't we really, when we say, hey, how do I build up trust? I think a lot of times what we're saying is like, how can I get her to believe in me? And you want it to happen sooner than maybe you deserve for it to happen.
Yeah.
Or alternatively, what can I do to manipulate her into trusting me? Which of course is the antithesis of trust. If you're trying to coerce and strong arm and blackmail and manipulate, that's not a great way to build trust either. So it's got to happen. You can't control her or him or whoever you're dealing with. You can't control that. All you can do is control yourself. And no, here's another reason, or here another consideration. You don't tell the truth so people trust you. Like that's not the motive for telling the truth. Now, people will trust you as a result of you telling the truth, but you tell the truth because it's the right thing to do. And if you're doing it as some sort of strategy to win a perceived game, when it doesn't happen the way that you want it to happen, you're going to abandon the strategy, right? So, okay, well, maybe if I tell the truth to my wife over the next, 30 to 60 days, then she'll believe and trust me. And then 30, 60 days later, she still doesn't trust you. Well, I guess that didn't work. So you go back to your ways and then you undermine your trust. You have to tell the truth for the right reason. And the right reason is simply it's the right thing to do. Period. Bottom line. Oh, and also good things will benefit or come from you telling the truth. But that's a byproduct, not the motive.
Yeah.
All right, last one.
Okay. Tyson Junkers. I've heard several financial advisors recommend investing in assets because of where inflation is headed. What are your thoughts on that? And if you agree with it, where would you start? Real estate, gold and silver, or the more obvious option of putting it all in Dogecoin?
Oh yeah, Dogecoin and let it ride.
That's tongue in cheek.
Yeah, it's probably not for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Look, again, you're a financial advisor. I am no longer a financial advisor. So let me just tell you what I would do and what I currently do, but take it with a grain of salt in your own specific scenario. Is I have investments everywhere.
Yeah.
Like I own real estate. In fact, we're considering buying some more real estate right now. I own plenty of cryptocurrency. I have money in cash. I have money in the stock market. We've got real estate. I put a lot of money into this business. I invest in myself. During COVID, I actually had the concern like right when COVID kicked off, I had the concern that getting to our money in banks would be a difficult thing to do. So I pulled a bunch of money out of the bank. So I have money. I have physical gold and silver. Like I have everything. So I know that's not real specific, but you build it, right? And so you build it on tiers. So I look at four factors when it comes to where I put my money. And I don't want to delve too deep into this, but maybe on another podcast, but 4 factors. So you have risk, you have liquidity, you have rate of return, and you have taxation. Like those are the 4 factors that I look at. And when I'm building or teaching somebody to build wealth, the most important factor to build on is to look at risk and liquidity. Like those are the most important factors. So if I have something that's highly liquid, it's probably not going to be as favorable in a taxation standpoint. But when I'm building wealth, that's where I want to start. Those are the two most important factors: safety and liquidity. Now, once you've established a strong base, now, okay, maybe I don't need it to be as liquid, or I don't need it to be as safe because I've got that stuff stored over here. And so I can look at something with higher potential rates of return, or something that's more tax favorable, but I'll lose some of these other factors. And so what I want non-correlated assets, right? So putting money in a bank account and then putting money literally under your mattress, that's a correlated asset. Like they're both going to lose net over time due to inflation. And it's the same, right? But if I have money in the stock market, that's probably going to be non-correlated to money that I have in real estate, let's say. And so as one performs well, the other may lag behind, and vice versa. So that's a little bit about what I'm looking for when it comes to how I invest my own money.
Yeah, I get this question all the time as a financial advisor, and I always deflect it because unless I can sit down and look at your situation, I'm not going to tell you anything, right? But I will say that I've made millions in real estate, I've made millions in the stock market, I've made millions in other investments, even in some insurance contracts, but it's because I've invested in those things. And so, and I haven't made money in crypto but because I haven't invested enough yet, if that makes sense. And so, we talked about consistency and other things throughout this podcast. That's really what it comes down to. What gets most guys, or most people in general, is that they're looking for the perfect investment, the perfect timing. And that's what Tyson's talking about right here, is the timing of it all, right? Because of inflation rates, because of, interest rates being so low, at a record low and even into the negatives, and kind of what's on the horizon and people's thoughts in that, what's happening politically. And so everybody's trying to time that. But you know what, no matter the timing, it's going to change a couple of years from now. A couple of years after that, it's going to change again. And so the more spread out, the better you are. But the bottom line is you got to invest. So many people don't pull the trigger because they're waiting for everything to be perfect, right? And so you just have to, the hardest part for everybody is starting. And once you start, then you learn, you figure out what you like, what you don't like. I mentioned real estate. I used to have rental properties, and I don't anymore, because I figured out, and my wife and I both figured out, we don't want to be landlords. It's just something we're not interested in. We can focus on other things, growing other businesses, growing things that are more profitable to us and make more sense, and they feel better to us than just being landlords. And so everybody's different, but until you start something, you're not going to learn and know what you're the most interested in. And then the last thing I would say, I actually got from Robert Kiyosaki, who wrote Think and Grow Rich. And my favorite book is Cash Flow Quadrant. He said, no matter what you invest in, he's a firm believer that you learn what you're investing in. You understand it, you learn about it, and you know how to properly use it.
Yeah. I mean, well, so, there's an interesting thing about the timing as well. You really do have to be careful on timing your investments. I think that's a recipe for disaster. Attempting to, that's probably a better way to say it. Yeah. Because what happens when you attempt to time it, you're always behind the curve. Because what are you basing your timing off of? Things that have already happened. So you're already behind the 8 ball because it's already happened. A lot of people do this with stock market, for example, is they try to predict what the market will do. And they're like, well, this is a great buy right now. It's like, no, the price that particular stock is at right now has all the information you have factored into the equation, minus any sort of insider information that you have that would be illegal, right? But everything else is already factored into the price. You're behind already. So don't worry about timing it. What I would suggest is you look for vulnerabilities in your planning. So let me explain it this way. At my son's football game yesterday, again, big guys, and we have a small line relative to the other team's line. Well, what they started doing, the other team, is they stacked their three biggest guys right in the middle of their defensive line and blitzed every play. And they crushed. They just broke up every play. Well, that's a vulnerability. So we need to make some adjustments. And the coaches made some adjustments, maybe missed a few. And knowing that they're doing that and knowing that's a flaw in our vulnerability, okay, then we have to do something to shore up that line. And that might mean that you don't necessarily have the best guy at guard or center, but you have mass there. We got to get some mass right in the center to keep them from breaking through that line. And so you make that adjustment because it's a vulnerability and you're constantly looking for those vulnerabilities. If you're exposed to all sorts of risk because you're heavily invested in the stock market or real estate market, okay, well, what adjustment needs to be made right here? Same thing I did with the pulling cash out of the account. Okay, that's I don't have any money at hand. Like I don't have any cash on hand. Vulnerability. Get that figured out, adjust it, figure it out, address it, and move on. So don't time, just look for those vulnerabilities.
And I'll end with this thought because I talked about listing our house. And so I was talking to a friend last night at church about us doing that. And he's like, wow, well, great timing for selling right now because it's obviously super high. And I just laughed. I agreed with him, but inside I thought, well, it doesn't matter. I'm not using it as an investment. Maybe it is good timing. I don't know, but I still have to buy a place somewhere else.
Exactly.
Right. And so it's all relative. And so it's not for the long game. It's not, I'm not selling my house right now because it's good timing. I'm selling my house because we no longer want to live in the area we're in, and so it's and I don't even know where we're moving to yet, but it's feels right for our family. It feels in line with our values. And so we're doing it. We're going to figure it out from there, but I'm not trying to time it.
Your timing is based on something different than market forces.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Well, good. Well, great questions. Did we miss any or did we hit them all? Are there still a few left over?
There's a couple. Yeah.
All right. We'll get to those next week, guys. We want to make sure we cover. We had some good questions today. We always do when we ask guys in Iron Council, and even the quality of questions that have gone up in the Facebook group and other places has improved as well. So appreciate you guys asking the thoughtful, thought-provoking questions. Biggest thing based on our conversation today is just share the episode, share the link, let guys know what we're doing, leave a rating review. And then if you're wanting to really make 2022 the best year that it can be, that starts right now. I mean, what are we, like 90 days away? Not even that. We really have November and December. Right. So we're like 60 days away at this point. So yeah, if you want to make 2022 a great year, it starts right now. And you can do that in the Iron Council at orderofman.com/Iron Council. All right, Sean, I appreciate you, man. We're going to just gradually phase Kip out here. So you've been doing a great job. And so we'll see if he's still listening to the end. So Kip, we're going to gradually phase you out and Sean's going to become your new replacement. I'm going to put you in.
Not looking to
do that against each other. Kip always does a great job. We love having Kip. He's hunting, in fact, this week as well. So I'm wishing him success on the hunt. All right, guys, we'll be back later this week. Until then, go out there, take action, and become the man you are meant to be.